It was 1990, and I was at the nerd center of the universe, Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. Not only that, I was backstage, and for no good reason. And on top of that, it was the evening when Douglas Adams was going to speak to the group. Douglas Adams, what was he going to talk about? Everybody was excited to wait for him. Now, what was I doing backstage? Well, believe it or not, I was trying to queue up a point in a videotape of a Twin Peaks episode. The part where Cooper has his dream and it's really weird, like even weirder than the rest of the stuff on Twin Peaks. I thought it would be really great if at some random moment in between speakers, that video just went up on the screen. And in those days, you could really make something like that happen. That's how unstructured, let's say, an Apple event was, even though this was sort of a keynote event. So I was trying to find the right spot in the videotape, and I was being helped by the legendary Mark B. Johnson of Apple Developer Relations. So we're trying to find the spot and going back and forth, and we're talking about it. And we say, I wonder when we'll get to show this. And Mark says, well, not until after Douglas Adams speaks. And I said, yeah, I wonder how long he's going to speak for. And then a voice from the corner of the room backstage, we hadn't even noticed a person there before, this voice that kind of reminded us of Marvin the Paranoid Android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, says, oh, I don't think he'll be speaking very long at all. And I look at Mark, and Mark looks at me, and we realize Douglas Adams is there. He's like 12 feet away from us, and we didn't even notice that he was there. Also, apparently he's having some trouble with his speech because he doesn't think he'll be able to speak for very long. So what do? Of course, we go over to bother him. We walk over and we greet him, and he's very gracious, even though he's struggling with his speech. And I say one of really the dumbest things I think I've ever said, which is, I don't know if you're tired of hearing this, but I'm a huge fan and I love your work. And he looked at me and he said, oh, I don't think I'll ever be tired of hearing that. And this is why I don't talk to famous people whose work I admire. But I didn't stop there. It got maybe worse. I couldn't help myself. I had to ask him the question of why. Why did you choose 42 as the magic number in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything? Why 42? What's special about it? This question has stumped thinkers for decades. And I didn't know at the time, but Douglas liked to give different answers at different times. Maybe he believed different things at different times. But here's what he said this time. He said, well, I needed a number that was boring, quiet, unassuming, that wouldn't be a distraction, that when it's revealed, it would make the reader say, that's the answer? So what's more boring than the 40s? When you're 40, you're boring. Maybe he was 40 at the time, I'm not sure. But he started in the 40s. Then he said, well, we can't have an odd number, 41, 43, those are out. Because odd numbers have an edge to them, they're sharp. And we can't have 40, a round number, obviously. So the first number I got to was 42. Yes. Pleasantly boring, extremely boring. No one would ever assume 42 was capable of anything special, let alone being the answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything. And that's why I chose 42. And I ate it up. I was sure that was the truth. And I'm sure I went on to tell 100 other people that that was the truth, even though he told many other stories about where 42 came from. But I don't remember quite reading that same story. So maybe that was a special story for Mac people because Douglas loved Mac people. In fact, Douglas once spoke at a Microsoft developer conference and got into a little bit of trouble because in the first minute or two that he was speaking, he said something like, well, you may know that I'm really a Mac person, and so I probably shouldn't be speaking here at a Microsoft conference. What a great thing to say at a Microsoft conference. Well, after that, Douglas went on and gave his speech, and it was incredibly well received, and it was super funny, I'm sure. I don't remember anything about it because all I remember is this backstage event before. But I will say that's enough for me to conclude that Douglas Adams is one of the greatest, if unsung, speakers in WWDC history. And to me, the irony is that 42, which he chose to be a boring, unassuming number, maybe, instead became an incredibly famous number because of Douglas Adams.